to you from Persia, also known as Babylon, and I am the king's second in command, as you will know by my luxurious attire, and my signet ring from the king himself. All right. Starting with the announcements. Attention, ladies. Attention. We're going to have a Greece 2025 trip. Meetings day right after church. The Wednesday kids cross-training resumes on August 21st. Finally, the CBC's golf tournament, it has arrived on August 22nd. And children's ministry workers training will be on Sunday, August 25th. Adult lunch outing will be this coming Thursday, is it this Thursday? August 29th. And Central Baptist shirts are now on sale. You just go to cbcdeerpark.org to pre-order. And coming up in November 8th and 9th, get ready for Mark Lowry's hometown weekend.
Your Highness, may I add?
Yes.
May your servant add August the 30th will be our first fifth quarter.
Okay.
And so anyone that wants to come up here and assist between like 9:30 and 12 will love it. Or if you can't, which I understand that lots of y'all cannot drive at night, and I completely respect that. I'd rather y'all stay at home. But if you can bring chips, drinks, or if you want to donate any money towards the food, we would appreciate it. Thank you, Your Highness.
You're welcome. And I would like to make one more announcement. Being as we are not in Persia at this moment, I will be allowing you to forego the edict that requires that you bow before me.
Thank you.
Okay. Enough of that. Oh wait, no, my lesson. Okay. Today's lesson, as you know that I am Haman. And so let's get on. We've done our announcements. That is done. And now let's go on with the lesson. Today's lesson is Haman, the slithery sidekick. Okay. So enough of that. You get the idea. Haman has a problem with being slithery, and he also has a problem with pride. And okay, so let me get back to being Donna. How did you guys feel about being the possibility of Haman actually delivering this lesson today?
We were in tune. We were like, yeah.
Were you paying attention? But how did it make you feel? Somebody that proud trying to tell you, give you a lesson.
Pride goes before a fall.
That's exactly what I'm fixing to say. That's exactly what I'm fixing to say. I feel like that pride is something that a lot of times it makes people shut down. They want to back away from you. I just don't want to be around that. It can make us ineffective in our service to the Lord and to other people. So, when we're in service to the Lord, even in our jobs, our everyday jobs, if you're a mom, if you're a wife, whatever your role is, if you're in ministry of some kind, you might be a leader or you might be a sidekick supporting leaders. But whatever it is, our lesson lets us know that we need to practice humility in that, because of course, we need to do it because pride is really can be a sin. It really can be a sin. It can lead to other sins. But beyond that, our purpose in being in ministry is to serve God and serve others. And pride can be a barrier to that and keep us from doing what we actually are supposed to be doing for the Lord. So just like Terry alluded to, Proverbs 16:18 says, pride goes before destruction and haughtiness before a fall. There's nothing wrong with being proud to be a Texan, being proud to be an American, but when that goes unchecked, those are just examples. When that goes unchecked, that's when it becomes a problem. Proud to be of your political affiliation, whatever. It's when it goes unchecked that it becomes a problem. Renee, would you read Proverbs 22:4 for us?
Proverbs 22:4. By humility and the fear of the Lord are riches, honor, and life.
All right. So, I like, when I'm preparing for my lessons, I like to do like a quick search on either the person that the lesson's about or maybe some of the keywords that we're studying. And so I did a fast search on Bible Gateway online on the word proud and pride. And I came up with 165 verses. And most of them were negative. They showed pride as a sin and something that God hates. And then I did another search on being humble and humility. And there were 63 results. But here's the weird thing. Even those verses, the majority of them were about how people were not humbling themselves and God wasn't happy with it. So clearly pride has always been a problem for us humans. We're humans. And but I also, when I was doing that, when I was looking through some of the verses, I scanned some of the verses and read some of them. And sometimes pride can be a blessing. So that might be a fun search or little research to do real quick if you get a chance. So as an example, if you want to do this one later, go ahead and look up Proverbs 17:6 when you get the time later on. And that one is where pride is actually a blessing. I'm sure there are probably others, but I just, I didn't take the time to read all 165, verses that there were. So like I said earlier, and even the scripture shows us that sometimes pride is good, but the majority of the time it's something that God hates. And that he may allow for a season while it suits his plan, but he always brings it back in check as soon as he's done using it for his plan. So here's what we're going to learn about Haman's story as it relates to pride. Pride can lead to discontentment or jealousy of other people. It can cause contempt in our hearts, just hatred. And it will corrupt our behavior, cause us to, again, maybe go into other sins that we may not have had a problem with, but we got so proud, we decided we were going to do this other thing that would break God's heart too. Then pride ultimately can lead to destruction. And not just our own destruction, like we'll find out about Haman later, but destruction of relationships or destruction of your witness. Pretty important. Consider the instruction. Most of our stuff is from the Old Testament today, but here's something from the New Testament. The instruction of Philippians, what we're supposed to do instead of being proud. It says, don't be jealous or proud, but be humble and consider others more important than yourself. And a lot of times I think women do pretty good with that. Most of the time. Not always. We're not always humble, but we tend to put others, ahead of ourselves. but we just need to make sure that we're practicing that. I'm going to open this up in prayer, if y'all don't mind. I humbly ask that you lead us in prayer. All right. God, guide us to greater understanding of your word today. We're all here because that is something that we desire. So, Lord, I ask that you bring peace to our minds, comfort over any worries or concerns that we might have that would draw us away from the lesson here and now, or the sermon that we hear from Brother Doug later on. Help us to keep in mind that we're here to praise you, to learn to love and serve you more, and to serve others more. Lord, help us to be more like Jesus in doing your work with humility. All right, so we're still talking about sidekicks, and we've been through several sidekicks. Aaron and her, which I'm going to refer to in a little bit. We did Barak and David. Last week was Jonathan. This time we're talking about Haman. And you probably may not, I don't know, maybe you don't even remember who is Haman, but you know who Esther is, right? Does everybody know the story of Esther? We're pretty familiar with it. And we're going to be dancing all around Esther today. We're going to, if you take a look at your outline of Esther that was at your place, it's kind of 10 chapters. I think it's 11. Several chapters, and but we're only going to be talking through Haman's plot to destroy the Jews and how Mordecai is honored. So I suggest that, if you want to know the whole story, give this a read, check it out, because it is a really good story. All right, so we're familiar with Esther. Our scriptures begin in chapter 3 of Esther, and this is during the time where the king of Persia, or the Medo-Persian Empire, was Ahasuerus, and he's been on the throne for about 3 years. He's already shown a lot of pride in his life, and it's ended up complicating his life. He has taken Esther as a second queen, and so that's where we're at with the king. Let's take a look at these other sidekicks. Haman is, I forgot to tell y'all that about Haman when I was being Haman. Haman is our main focus today. He is King A's sidekick, and he was out for honor and glory. And he was called, I think the son of, I can't remember the guy's name, but his father was called the Agagite. And what that means is he was a descendant of King Agag. And King Agag was the king of the Amalekites. Now, the Amalekites probably sounds a little bit more familiar to you because we hear about them in the Old Testament a few times. They were ancient enemies of the Jews. They started out as enemies when Moses brought the Israelites into he was about to bring them into the Promised Land. He started coming into Canaan, and there was the big battle where Aaron and Hur had to hold up Moses' hands so they could continue to win. Y'all remember Renee did that really cool illustration for us. So that's the first time that the Israelites fought against the Amalekites. And but that wasn't King Agag. He came later on. The Amalekites are actually descendants of Esau. That's Jacob's brother, the one who sold his birthright. And so anyway, they were enemies. And later on, fast forward a couple hundred years, a few hundred years, King Saul, God commands him to destroy the Amalekites, to kill them. And of course, Saul, being Saul, did not do what God had commanded him to do. He defeated the army, but he decided he was going to take King Agag as a prisoner. And he did not destroy him. What ended up happening is the prophet and judge Samuel later on hacked Agag to pieces, and he cursed the Amalekites. So keep these facts in mind as Haman's story begins to unfold. He's got some bad blood for the Jews. So unfortunately, King Ahasuerus had a huge ego, and he was easily influenced by slithery Haman. He liked to manipulate. He would flatter him, and it caused a lot of problems. King Ahasuerus, that's why I'm calling him King A, because it's too hard to say his name. He is known in history also as King Xerxes the First. You can go and look up in a history book and that'll tell all about him. He is a real person. If anybody ever wants to tell you that the Bible's a storybook, no, it's not. It's part of history. Now, so Haman is King A's sidekick. He's not a good one, and that's what this whole point is about. Sometimes we need to give an example of what not to do, and Haman is how not to be a sidekick. But King A also had a sidekick in Esther. Esther was a secret Jew, if you remember the story, and she had her own sidekick, her uncle Mordecai. And he was also a Jew on the quiet, and we'll find out a little bit more about that in a minute. So let's start out by reading about Haman's rise to power and how he handled it. So our first set of scriptures is on page 142. This is Esther in your book. I think it's 142. Please correct me if I'm
44.
144, sorry. And it's Esther 3, 1 through 5. Who wants to check that out for us? Oh, wait. Hold on. I think we have something else. Let's talk about proud sidekicks. We already just did these, didn't we? Well, here's just a picture of, I loved all these images of Haman, because he was always just, and most of them he has a blue robe. I don't know what that's about. I think maybe the scripture says that the king gave him a blue robe. I know it said that he gave Mordecai a blue robe later on. Okay, so we did do those. Let's go to Esther 3, 1 through 5. Who wants to read that for us? Mary, go right ahead.
After all this took place, King Ahasuerus honored Haman, son of Mephia and Agagah. He promoted him in rank and gave him higher position than all of the other officials. And the entire royal staff at the king's gate bowed down and paid homage to Haman, because the king had commanded this to be done for him. But Mordecai would not bow down or pay homage. This members of the royal staff at the king's gate asked Mordecai, why are you disobeying the king's commandments? And when they had warned him day after day and still would not listen to them, they told Haman in order to see if Mordecai's action would be tolerated, since he had told them he was a Jew. And when Haman saw that Mordecai was not bowing down or paying him homage, he was filled with rage.
Okay, so I know it probably seemed over the top when I was being Haman, but he really had a problem. He wanted to be important. He wanted everybody to know about his position, and he probably felt puffed up because he was a descendant of King Agag, and then he had received this trusted position. He had all these perks. And it talks about the king giving him his ring, and he has these robes, and I'm sure he had property and stuff that was given to him. And the king even ordered everyone to bow before him when he rode through the streets on this special horse that he had given him and everything. But that wasn't enough for him. And Haman actually had some sidekicks too. They were not good sidekicks either. They were the other royal officials. And as Mary just read for us, they tattled on Mordecai. It wasn't like Haman is riding through the streets and he notices that Mordecai is not bowing. That's not what the story says. The story says that the royal officials went and told him, hey, Mordecai, that guy, he's not bowing. And he lets him know. And so this is when, from them egging Haman on, he just becomes enraged. And probably some of it is because of his background. He's part of a race that's an ancient enemy of the Jews. That his people have been cursed by the Jews. And it probably was not so much about the fact that a person wasn't bowing, but more that Mordecai, a Jew, was not bowing to him, and that he refused to bow. So it probably set his Amalekite blood boiling. And this actually, Terry had mentioned this to me on Wednesday night. This is probably the first recorded act of anti-Semitism in the Bible, where they hated them just because they were Jews. For no other reason, they were hated just because they were Jews. But beyond that, keep in mind that, or if you remember this from reading some of the other prophets in the Old Testament, that the Jews had been in exile in Babylon, and then there's been a couple of kings since Daniel's days and all of that good stuff. But the exile is over. Nehemiah has built the wall, and most of the Jews went back to their homeland, their home country. But some of those people didn't want to give up the life that they had built there in Babylon over a 60-year period. And so they stayed. And they were basically freed slaves living in this society. And so it wasn't just Haman who didn't like them. There were other people in the society there that didn't like them because they saw them having positions of prominence and property. And for Pete's sake, we just read that Mordecai sat at the city gate with all the other leaders, and he was a Jew. And so this is why Mordecai kept that quiet, and he advised Esther not to tell anyone that she was a Jew, because they were not well liked really by most people. So we had some other scriptures on pride. I think I have 3 different ones. So Kelly and Chastity, I wanted to call you Charity, and Janice. Janice, would you start reading scriptures on pride for us?
Proverbs 11:2, pride leads to disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom.
Okay.
Psalm 73:6. They wear pride like a jeweled necklace and clothe themselves with cruelty.
Psalm 73:8. They scoff and speak only evil, and their pride they seek to crush others.
Okay. So these 2 verses, it's about hatred. Pride leading to hatred and wanting to hurt other people. Not just, I'm proud of myself because I did a good job, or I'm proud that I have a beautiful family, but I deserve this because, of whatever. Something that I probably can't even help. I was born in America or whatever, that kind of thing. But Genesis was good too because it contrasts pride against humility and the benefits of humility and the downfall of pride, right? So let's go on to our second set of scriptures. And this is where pride doesn't just lead to discontent, it actually leads to contempt or hatred and corruption. Who wants to read our second set of scriptures for us? Miss Jackie.
And when he learned of Mordecai's ethnic identity, it seemed repugnant to Haman to do away with Mordecai alone.
he planned to destroy all of Mordecai's people, the Jews, throughout Ahasuerus' kingdom. In the first month, the month of Nisan, in King A's 12th year, the pur, that is, the lot was cast before Haman for each day in each month, and it fell on the 12th month, the month Adar. Then Haman informed King A, there is one ethnic group scattered throughout the peoples in every province of your kingdom, keeping themselves separate. Their laws are different from everyone else's, and they do not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. If the king approves, let an order be drawn up authorizing their destruction, and I will pay 375 tons of silver to the officials for deposit in the royal treasury.
Okay. So we see that Haman is hatching his plan. He's not going to just let this Jew not bow before him, because everybody else might follow suit, right? And he's not going to have that. He makes his plan to destroy the Jews, and the first thing he does in verse 7 is he goes and he consults his gods, and he casts lots, basically like rolling the dice, so he can decide when is he going to put his plan into action. And so, just as a side note, the Israelites, the priests, also cast lots to help them determine what God wanted them to do. It was part of their religious practice. So it was a common thing that happened, but Haman's he's not consulting God in the tabernacle with the priest present. He's consulting his pagan gods and doing this. He does it during the first month, as Jackie read, of the year. And the dice, or the lots, land on the fact that he should execute his plan in the 12th month of the year. So even when they think, even when we don't know God's working, who knows, God can control how the dice lands. That's not a coincidence that it's a whole year. And what that did was it gave Mordecai a chance to find out about the plan, and it gave Mordecai and Esther a time to help find all those Jews throughout the kingdom that we just heard about, and let them know, hey, this is what's coming. We need everybody to fast and pray. We're seeking God for how can we get out of this, because they want to destroy us. So they get the word out to the other Jews. They fast and pray for God's direction and his deliverance, and they just are preparing. So God gave them that time. And then in verse 8, you start seeing how Haman is manipulating the king. He's actually lying, because the Jews haven't done any of this. And he conveniently forgets to mention that the people that he's talking about are the Jews. Keep in mind that the king doesn't know that Esther is a Jew. And he probably doesn't even know that Mordecai's a Jew. But he doesn't mention anything about Mordecai and his failure to bow. He doesn't say who these people are, but there are some people, and they're not doing what they should be doing for you, king, but I've got your back, and I'm going to go ahead and I'll even pay for this plan, right? He wants to pay for it himself, and this would be billions of dollars in today's money that he's going to pay. So where is he going to get this money from? We heard the very last verse there. He's going to take care of that cost by confiscating their homes, their property of these Jews that he slaughters, in order to pay for all the costs associated with that. Who knows of another time in more recent history where the belongings of the Jews were sold
World War
after they
II.
were slaughtered? Yeah, the Holocaust. Their artwork, their jewelry, their homes, everything was taken from them. And that probably did finance some of Hitler's plans, right? So maybe he was taking a page out of Haman's book.
Well, when you listen to satanic beings,
Right.
which is what Haman did and what Hitler did, then you're going to do what is Satan's game plan. And it never changes. It's always the same. He's very he's not an original individual, and he's a plagiarist. So that's why as a matter of fact, the 12th month. Does anybody know what that 12th month is? Like where that would fall if it was our calendar?
Yeah, February and March.
Well, March, April.
That's what it says, February and
My Bible says March, April.
That's true.
Well, Google's not always right. Just so you know.
That's true.
It referred it to Esther 3:7 too.
So, is that, so that would kind of fall around Passover?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, again, a mockery.
Uh-huh.
Satan making a mockery.
Yeah, so
of-
he's taking
of
a holy
celebration.
date of the Israelites and he's using it again for his own devices.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. The other thing is just along with that side note about Hitler, he was very much into the occult. And we learned in David's class that whatever they call these different gods, they all are from the same source. You know, so whether it was Haman's gods that he worshipped back in this time of the Persian Empire, or it's, whatever German occult practices Hitler did, it's all the same source. So,
I just wanted to point out it wasn't December. Like we would think
Yes.
12th month, oh, that's December.
Exactly. So it was just 12 months later, and it was it was the Hebrew calendar, so their calendar is
Right.
different.
Different than
from
ours, yes.
Something that I found really weird, and I just feel like I need to share this with y'all. You know how you're reading all in the same Bible, God's chosen people are referred to as the Hebrews, and then they're referred to as the Israelites, and then later on, even in Esther, they're called the Jews. And I was like, what is that about? And so before God made the covenant, or before they came into the promised land, they were referred to as Hebrews. And then after they were in the promised land, they were called Israelites. Then starting with the Babylonian exile, they started becoming called Jews after being like the tribe of Judah. So that was pretty cool. Because I was like, well, what am I supposed to call them? Am I supposed to call them Hebrews or Jews? What is the deal? So it's just whatever was, it kind of was a transition of those different terms. And Jews is shorter and it's easier for me to say, so there you go. Before we fast forward and see the consequences of Haman's pride, does anybody have either a quick story of when you learned humility, or maybe you just want to share a name of the person who taught you to be humble? You don't have to say anything else other than their name if you want. I'm going to say one. Mama. Okay. Because we have to learn that. It's not our nature to be humble. And the world is constantly teaching us to be puffed up. Get likes, get subscribers. Be the GOAT, And that's been going on a long time. Like our 5 Meets Life talks about the GOAT, the greatest of all times. You know who started that? Muhammad Ali, his wife. Because remember he said, I'm the greatest of all times. That's where GOAT comes from. And you hear Tom Brady being called the GOAT, and Simone Biles is the GOAT, and whoever,
I didn't know that's what that was from. I
Yeah.
kept seeing people calling Simone Biles the GOAT, and I was like, why are they
Yeah,
calling
she-
that nice
she- That's the GOAT. That's the
Greatest
GOAT.
of all times.
Yes, the greatest of all times, yeah. So that's what that means.
I just thought it meant they were old.
It means they're the greatest in whatever their profession is. Most of the time it's sports.
You're old. You're a goat. Old goat. You say old
Isn't that
goat.
funny? But yeah, it's all the way back from Muhammad Ali, and his wife is the one who started saying goat, but he didn't really catch on until more recently. And now you hear it all the time. There the goat, there the goat. And our lesson in the some of the notes, it says, you know, Jesus is the one that's serving us at all times.
That's
We
right.
should be giving, you know, honor to him and not necessarily, and not that it's wrong for these athletes to enjoy their accomplishments, but if they start believing all that press about themselves, again, unchecked pride is where the problem is. All right, so let's see, where am I at? What slide am I on? 3, 6 through 9. Okay, so we saw that Haman had his plans. He was making his plans. He consults his God, but our God is still in control. The God of Israel is still in control. And he keeps scheming. He's manipulating. He's slithery. And so he is the anti-sidekick. We don't want to be like that sidekick. We want to support leaders, not manipulate them. We don't want to let our pride get in the way of serving God. So let's go to our third set of scriptures. And this is, we're jumping ahead to chapter 6, verse 10 through 14. Who wants to read that for us?
Okay. The king told Haman, hurry and do just as you proposed. Take a garment and a horse for Mordecai the Jew who is sitting at the king's gate. Do not leave out anything you have suggested. So Haman took the garment and the horse. He clothed Mordecai and paraded him through the city square, calling out before him, "This is what is done for the man the king wants to honor." Then Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman hurried off for home, mournful and with his head covered. Haman told his wife Zeresh and all his friends everything that had happened. His advisors and his wife Zeresh said to him, "Since Mordecai is Jewish, and you have begun to fall before him, you won't overcome him, because your downfall is certain." While they were still speaking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and rushed Haman to the banquet Esther had prepared.
Okay, so there's a lot of stuff that happened in between here. Way back at the beginning, at some point in the beginning, when Esther had become queen, Mordecai has been part of the king's court already. He had foiled an assassination attempt, but somehow it went unnoticed. It was recorded in the historical record for the king's historical records, but he didn't get any recognition for that. It just kind of got shuffled off to the side. So we fast forward, and Haman, you know, he's got his plot. He thinks he has fooled the king. And we know that he has talked, he's out to destroy all the Jews. So Haman ends up being forced to humiliate himself. So in verse 10 we read that King Ahasuerus, or Xerxes the first, he couldn't sleep, and so he called for these historical documents and began to read them. Who do you think kept him from sleeping that night?
God.
That's right. And why did he choose those reading materials? God brought that to his mind. God reminded him of Mordecai's loyalty. So God has planted that seed in his head. And then Haman, he goes to the king, and it's kind of a weird situation where the next day the king has remembered that Mordecai saved his life and that he hasn't been recognized for it. And so they're both, Haman and King A are talking to each other, and one thinks that he's talking about one thing, and the other one thinks he's talking about something else. So Haman thinks he's talking about me. He wants to honor me, you know, because he's proud. He thinks everything's about him, right? But the king is wanting to honor Mordecai, and he's actually honestly asking for his second in command's ideas on the matter. How can we do this? He's not trying to be facetious. He is really saying, how would you honor this person? And so Haman starts thinking of the best possible thing that can possibly happen, and he wants to put that plan into action because he thinks he's going to get all that. And when the king says, yes, go and do this for Mordecai, he's like, oh no, you know. So he is humiliated. His enemy, all these court officials, these royal officials that have been tattling about Mordecai, they know. Oh, he had to do that for Mordecai. I can't believe this, right? So Haman is just crushed. He goes home. He's looking for some sympathy, some support from his wife, from his friends. And they're all like, dude, you're on your own. They don't give him any love, right? He's just on his own. And before he can even get over that shock, the king's eunuchs come to take him to this second banquet that Esther is preparing, where he is a special guest. He and the king are special guests. The thing about this second banquet, I know y'all remember the story of Esther. You know, she's this Jew in hiding. You know, nobody knows that she's a Jew. She's been made the queen, but queens of the king of Persia don't get to just sleep in the bed next to their husband every night and see him every morning for breakfast. And it's not like a husband-wife relationship that we would have today. She comes when he calls her. You know, if she's lucky enough for her to call him, for him to call her. And so she knew what she needed to do. Mordecai had talked to her. She was going to be brave. She went before him in the court. And when he asks her what she wants, she says, I just want to give you a banquet. So she needs time to kind of get reacquainted with him, for him to remember how much he loves her. And so she just waits on him and all this, and he is just smitten with her beauty and, you know, her charms and everything at the first banquet. So he's, what do you want? What can I give to you, Esther? She says, well, let me give you another banquet tomorrow night, a special banquet for you and for Haman again. So she's kind of buttering Haman up, and she's buttering the king up a little bit. And so she does that, and so now it's time for the second banquet. So he's dragged to the banquet, he's humiliated, he's just probably, you know, does the king know what I did? Does he know about my plan, that it's really because of these reasons? So this is when Esther finally lets the king know exactly what Haman has been up to. And she comes clean about her nationality and her connection to Mordecai, who's also a Jew, right? So, but that's the end of our scripture, but that's not really the end of the story. So we have just a minute. I want to just kind of give you a highlight of that was the humiliation that came from Mordecai's pride. But there's also destruction that came from Mordecai's pride. And this is all covered in Esther chapters 6 through 10, which, you know, we're not covering today because we don't have time to do 11 chapters here. But the rest of the story of these sidekicks happens after this. Haman, the slithery sidekick, has made his plan. He thinks that the king is fooled. But Esther and her sidekick, she has a good sidekick, right? They have sought the Lord. They've encouraged one another. They organized the other Jews. They fasted and prayed. And God directed Esther on how to handle the king. And maybe sometimes directly, sometimes through her sidekick Mordecai. But she knew how to handle the king. She knew that he would respond with his pride, right? He was proud too. But Haman, we just saw, he ended up suffering humiliation, but he also was killed. The exact execution that he had planned for Mordecai is what he suffered.
And his family.
And his family. That's the very next bullet point in my notes right here. The king promotes Mordecai, and Haman is not just fired, he's killed. He's tongue, and set on a pole that he had set up for Mordecai. And Esther is given a position of power, or at least some kind of official influence. So she's honored as well for her role. But not only was Haman executed, like we just said, but his 10 sons were all killed in the same manner and set on spikes for everyone to see. So death and humiliation. And then, in addition to that, and I can't get into the whole story, but approximately 75,000 men were also killed by the Jews that they sought to destroy. Now, this is all as a result of Esther's influence with the king. We've mentioned before in different lessons that the Medo-Persian law, when the king put something into law, it didn't matter that he was the king. He could never go back on that law. So he didn't say, we're not going to do that. He says, we're going to do this right here. So he empowered the Jews to defend themselves. He helped them to defend themselves. He didn't say, no one can hurt the Jews. He didn't go back on that law that Haman had gotten him to put in place. He made a way for the Jews to be able to defend themselves, and they ended up killing 75,000 men that sought to destroy them. Now, all of this could have been spurred on by the king's own pride, but who knows that God can take something that is meant for evil or revenge or whatever, and he can use it for the good of his people. And that's exactly what happened. So now that we know that pride can be destructive, how can we apply this knowledge to keep pride from becoming contempt in our hearts, leading to other sinful behaviors, destructive behaviors? We might not end up on a pole outside the king's castle, but we can destroy relationships and things. We can throw away blessings when we let pride rule. So how can we keep that from happening? Let's take a look at this. How do we live it out? Check your attitude and your motivations. Why are you doing these things? Why are you proud to be an American? It's good to be proud to be an American, but why are you proud to be an American? Are you letting that take over and become something else in your heart or in your life that ruins your witness? And that's just an example. I am very proud to be an American, guys. It's easy to get puffed up when we're successful, and even when we're successful in the Lord's service, when we're serving others. You can be a proud mama and be very proud of your children, and it become a destructive thing. Right, exactly. So what we do is we check our attitude. I graduated from high school in 1983, and around that time, hip hop came to be. And so we would say, you better check yourself before you wreck yourself. Check. Right? So I always think about that when I think, check your attitude. Check it and be aware. And confess your pride to the Lord. If you find that it's through your checking, you find, hey, yeah, I was out of control on that one. And it's not just because we should be humble. It's because we have a job to do on this planet, and that is to serve the Lord, serve others for His glory. And just like probably some of y'all shut down when you saw me coming in here with this crazy robe, and she's standing on she's kissed the ring and all of this. That's a turn off to people, or it can be. It's funny. It was meant to be funny, but an illustration. But we want our efforts to be as effective as possible. So we don't want pride to get in the way. So confess that. And then we all need to be accountable to a trusted Christian friend that can keep us in check, keep us mindful that whatever we do, we need to be doing it with humility. Right?
Right.
I was late.